Welcome to the C Word, the Conservators podcast. Today we're talking about being heard. I'm Jane Henderson, an objects conservator based in South Yorkshire.
And I'm Kloe, an objects conservator based in Greater Manchester.
And today we have a special guest host. Hello, Jane. Introduce yourself.
I'm Jane Henderson, a conservator who teaches in Cardiff.
Welcome aboard, Jane. We're glad to have you back.
Always a pleasure.
Oh, you flatter us. Right, just a quick piece of news before we start. I just want to say that there's a talk up on Icon's website. You do have to be a member to access it, but it's a really good one. It's Dennis Lee's talk on contract law for conservators. It's called Who's Afraid of Legal Contracts? And it's a really good talk, and the slides are up as well. Super useful. Do check it out. I actually went to this one. It was in London in the Freemasons Hall. It was really cool, very posh. It was done by the Paintings Group, I want to say, and boy, do they know how to put a talk on. There was Prosecco, there was cheese. Oh, guys, we've got to up our game. This is amazing. Prosecco and cheese, guys. That's amazing. Yeah, it was really good. And now the kind of audio file and the slides are up on Icon's website. So if you're a member, you can log in and have a listen. It's really useful, so I do recommend it. Yeah, that's my piece of news, basically.
Great.
All right. What are we talking about today, Kloe?
So today we're talking about, well, as you said, being heard in conservation. We, as conservators, have the duty of knowing about object safety, obviously, which is the perfect partner to curators who know about object history, technicians who know about object display and visitor engagement, about object education and all of that. But that also means that we are the ones who know all the things that can go wrong.
No pressure.
We have all of these rules in our heads that we follow to ensure object safety. It can also feel like we have the whole conservation profession, past and future, watching what we're doing, making sure that we're doing it right, making sure that we're not endangering any objects and that we're working to best practice. But we're often only one person against whole institutions. And basically, we are the ones who have to be, in some ways, the grumpy pants naysayers who have to say no to everybody, and that can be a big problem. So we are here with Jane, who has my first ideas of this as a problem and this as a with some solutions, of course. Was in Cardiff, where I did my degree, and this was part of one of the lectures, and I was really interested in it. And I think, Jane, you have a couple of thoughts on this, don't you?
I have been known to have thoughts on this topic. Yes. I think it's because I specialised in shouting angrily at people for a few years.
Amazing.
And I was surprised continuously how ineffective it was as a means of communication. But it didn't stop me trying.
So why did you shout at people? What was the cause of shouting?
My favourite story, which I think I've probably bored you both with before, is some lamps in a museum. The museum had bought some lamps that were ridiculously bright. They were sort of floodlight lamps, car lamps,
God.
and they were so bright. And the curator and I talk about these lamps all the time, and I said, these are awful. And Jenny, have you got your bell ready?
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, don't you worry. That's going to be some censoring.
These bells are tinkle, 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 useless, and so on. Every time we met, and then the curator moved and went to another gallery, and he installed new lights, and he installed the same lights, and I was genuinely shocked, and I was like, did I not make myself tinkling clear about how tinkling awful those lights are? And it really puzzled me for a long time as to why, when I had been so categorical about how appalling the lights were, that he'd gone and installed them in a second gallery. And it was my fault, because I'd made this a point of pride. I'd forced the situation where he had to defend the lights, and to put anything else apart from those kinds of lights in again would have been a climb down.
Oh, I see.
Psychological.
Yeah, that's quite good. Oh, that's an interesting example. I like that. I was quite enjoying when you were building up to this, that it sounded like there was a teeny tiny conservator against the monster of an institution. And I also enjoyed that with the naysayers, because actually in a lot of episodes now we've been saying that we're always trying to be the yes-sayers and always trying to enable people.
Yeah.
But I suppose sometimes we do have to put our foot down.
I think the thing I've noticed is that all of the people involved in object display and object storytelling have so many ideas and events that are so different and interesting to things that have been done before traditionally. And if the relationship is positive, they ask the conservators about it. And it's really hard to not say, you want to do what?
See, I find it goes two ways sometimes, because I feel like people do come and ask me about things and I'm like, yes, of course, that's all right. Because I feel like maybe in the past people have perceived that conservators are very stern and they never say yes to anything. So they're really nervous about asking me. And it seems to be more of a blanket ban, like any insect ever in a museum is bad. And I'm like, no, we worry about these ones.
Yeah.
I don't mind that you come to me with a handful of ladybirds, but I'm not that fussed. Like, that bit's okay. Let them out.
I think maybe what we've tried to do is say no to everything and hope that something sticks.
yeah, maybe actually.
And I think, one of the things I've learned from parenting about this is that, know what you're prepared to fight for.
Oh, yeah.
Only ask, really, really think, how far would I be prepared to go to get this change or not to do this, and do I really need it? Because if we, like Kloe was saying, if we could make more positive encounters and fewer negative ones, then the people might listen to you when it comes to the negative ones. But if they expect to know, if they come in to see you expecting a no, then I think it's like, well, she said no, of course she did, that's what she does. Conservatives say no.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, so whether do we listen to this no or don't we? Because we didn't listen to the last no and the end of the world wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
So what can we do to be heard? What can we do?
Well, the number one thing to think about when you're trying to influence someone is not what you're interested in, but what they're interested in. Because we tend to fixate on the thing that we want to communicate to them. Here's our message. And we craft it and work on it. But actually, the thing that we should fixate on is who is it that we're trying to communicate with and what are they interested in?
It's kind of obvious now that I think about it, but obviously you have to think about who your audience is, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
And our colleagues are kind of as variegated as we are. So some people, they like to think of themselves as very relaxed or really progressive or really challenging, or they like to think of themselves as methodical and efficient. And all those different things, they're called self-schema, they'll all affect the way that they hear what you say to them.
I feel like we're really going into psychological territory now.
Yeah.
That's really fun.
You did invite me.
Yeah, I like that. No, I like that. Please tell me more.
So how did you change your behaviour back in the day when you were yelling at people?
From yelling and stomping your feet.
There was a lot of stamping. It took me a very long time. I'm very slow, I am. Because some people would do what you were told. And I kind of, some people, military museums, for example, great with a list. Love a list. No, I really, the light thing really bugged and ate away at me. And I went back to college and I did a master's, same as you guys. And I decided just to study that for my dissertation. And it was all to do with these lights. It was really the big prompt. And I wanted to know how to be more influential. So I thought, I'm going to go and actually learn how to do it. I mean, I wouldn't say I was 100% good at it, but what I got out from that was that you could actually learn to do this. It's not just, some people have got it and some people haven't, but this is something you can learn. And that was good.
Oh, that is good. That is really positive.
I think I've done more things where I've shared in other people's concerns. So one of the things I've done really well is get involved in policy writing.
Ooh.
And I put this much, I don't sit at the policy writing meetings and say, conservation. I actually engage with the other stuff as well. So how do we communicate about this problem, or what about this example? So I think being seen to care about other people's agendas is a behavioural change that you can do. Make sure in the meeting you've acknowledged and engaged with their agenda before you ask them to acknowledge and engage with yours.
Oh,
I like that.
That is a good one. I feel like arguably that does work really well because I'm part of a really small team now. So you kind of have to care about other people's stuff because it's, you're all part of the team.
Yeah.
So yeah, I might be the only conservator and like the collections team is small, but that still means that you get to talk loads to everyone else. And so you kind of take a whole new ownership of other people's stuff. Like, not that it's your responsibility, but more that you can have input and you can actually be helpful with them. So I feel like that's really helped. I suppose it's more of a challenge if you're part of a conservation department that is very remote from, say, the other departments. And that becomes more challenging, but still something that is achievable, I think.
Well, that means that you just have to, you know, those emails that you delete that says who would like to come to an all-organisation meeting about so. And we haven't got time for that. We're busy conservators. You just have to pick them on when there's going to be good quality biscuits and coffee and go along. Yeah. And that's then you create a sort of a positive relationship with people that may be off topic. Yeah. But it creates a kind of positive relationship, and then you might get to be known as, there's the weird conservative who actually doesn't say no to everything.
Yeah. My second bullet point question of things to discuss is how can we maintain positive relationships while saying no? Oh. So we've got the positive relationships, and we've got the meetings and being the conservator who maybe brings biscuits herself as well. Ooh. Herself, himself, themselves. Yeah, sorry.
Being inclusive.
So I have two questions.
Oh, you're asking about saying no, and I think we still have to think about when we say no, but it's like as rarely as possible. And you don't necessarily say no. You can do that thing when you make them work out as a no themselves by saying, we can do this. All we need is a nitrogen cylinder.
Oh, yes.
Case from this company. I'll send you the details. And you know what I mean? And some oxygen scavengers. And would you like me to help you look for a grant funder to fund this? Do you know what I mean? And I think that's a no.
I like that, I guess. I think that's a way of saying this is why I've said no, rather than saying that's a dumb idea. Why would you do that?
As soon as you say the dumb idea, you're back to where me and this anonymous curator was with that.
Yeah, that's
because then it's either you're a dumb or these lights are correct.
Oh,
and you give choice.
Yeah.
People don't tend to choose dumb.
No, that's true.
I feel like I have a fixed facial expression that I accidentally pull when I'm thinking, what? I like to think that I can hide my emotions, but I wonder if I can't.
Oh, I definitely don't. It's very evident in a meeting when I'm thinking something is bad. It is a slight problem. On the other hand, people do appreciate that. They're like, she doesn't like that. Look at her. Yeah, thanks.
I had a terrible pen tapping habit. That if someone was annoying me, I'd be tapping my pen frantically.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
I didn't even realise I was doing it until somebody told me.
Was it the frequency of the pen tapping that indicated the severity of the...
Yeah. It was like a proxy for foot stamping. I can't stop my feet, so I'm going to tap my pen. Like the rest.
Yeah. It needs to come out somehow.
I think my colleague and I have a sort of sidelong glance when somebody suggests something and we're thinking, basically that glance means, how do we say no?
Who's going to start?
Why do we do this? So what about embedded practices? Because I feel like we're often in conservation fairly young women. That's the baseline. We tend to always be fairly young women. We're going into institutions that have people in them who have been working there for upwards of 10 years. They do things the way they want to do them. They come from a conservation world or a collections care world that is not the same as it is now. And essentially, we have the responsibility of the objects, but do we have the control?
Oh, that's hard.
And so you're thinking that those people are doing things that you don't think are right?
Yeah, in that hypothetical context that nobody, of course, listening to this has ever encountered themselves.
Yes, you're talking about conservation colleagues or curatorial colleagues?
I suppose I'll say colleagues in general. So it can encompass collections assistants, gallery technicians, curatorial, visitor experience, any of the above. I think the variety of the way that museums and collections care departments work can mean that it just gets vastly complicated.
I mean, I will put in a little pitch for the oldies, as an oldie myself these days. I'm always dead impressed how many people get in touch with me when I send students to work with them, saying, we love having students because they challenge us and they give us a new perspective.
That's really good.
And it is really nice. And of course, I hear that a lot. So, there are people out there who do like being challenged, but there are people who don't. But don't forget that there are some people who do like being challenged. So it's a question of how you challenge people. And I guess the first thing they're going to say is, well, I've done it like this and nothing bad has happened.
That's the exact phrase that I have in my mind.
Yes, I do hear that a lot.
But
like
we've always done it like this.
Yeah, or like
time.
I've always touched lead with my bare hands. I'm fine.
You can stamp when it comes to health and safety.
Yeah.
If they're licking the lead, you can say no, just stop doing that.
Yeah.
And if you're interested in hazards and collections, then you can listen to our hazards episode in series 2.
Yeah, danger. That's a good one.
No, I think the thing is, you have to ask yourself honestly, is it doing any harm? Because, we've got our new ways. You've got the young people always want to change the way things are done by the old people. That's just like the way of the world, isn't it? It's the way of life. And mostly the young people win and get to do things new and better, and then we all progress. But there's a few times when the way things were done before were perfectly fine. So I think I would ask, are you sure that your way is better? Are you sort of replacing their dogma with your dogma, as in they've got a dogma of this is how we've always done it, and you've got a dogma, well, this is what I was told to do? Or do you actually have like real evidence that what they're doing is problematic? If they're, touching the lead with their tongue, then we have.
Yes.
I identify this through taste.
But, if there is a real problem, then you have to sort of think about how much do they care about the damage to the object versus how much do they care about the damage to their ego? And really, you've got to think of a way of getting them to identify that damage to the object that they're causing, but protect their ego. Their egos are fragile. People's egos are fragile. So how do you get them to do that? And it might be that getting it from you might be, they're too young, I can't be told. But it might be that somebody else can tell them, in a different way. So it might be, if you say it was front of house staff, you've always got a range of people there in the front of house, haven't you? So if you can win round the progressives, then they'll pick off the dug-in one for you. They'll start, they go, come on, Timothy, we've been told, stop it, Timothy. And tell you what, we've changed, And if you can get you got the volunteers, you can always pick off, the progressive, not with training and encouragement and reinforcement, and then get them to do it. I mean, sometimes you can get someone higher up, if it's really urgent, if it's critical and it's damaging something immediately, then you can't go over people's heads, but that will damage your long-term working relationship. So you really need to play that card very rarely. No, you need to play that only when they're more likely to get the sack for what they're doing than, you know what I mean? Complained.
Yeah. I have to say, sometimes it does seem to help to have several sources. So if it's at all possible to have not just me tell them, but
carry around a bibliography in your pocket.
No, so that's not going to help. But what can help is, for example, someone coming in, like a visiting other museum person, to say the same thing is actually really helpful. Or it can be, you can somehow direct them to see it on Twitter, because sometimes other professionals talking about the same things that you're talking about in a professional capacity on social media is another reason that people go, oh, yes, no, I have seen that thing that you're talking about. Actually, yes, maybe we will stop doing that. Or, sometimes they just needs to be reinforced so they don't hear one voice, I find.
And I'm guessing you don't mean passive-aggressively sending them a link on Facebook.
No, that's not a good idea. You kind of have to let them do the discovery themselves.
Exactly. Let them discover it themselves. And visiting places as well. Going to see other museums, because that's always a very popular kind of professional development thing. Go to see another museum nearby. Yeah. Pick it with one, what your problem is. Pick one that is doing it well. Set that museum up to do the talk. Make sure that they mention the thing that you're concerned about, and then, say something along the lines of, oh yeah, we've been worrying about that too, haven't we, Timothy?
Yes. I hope you don't have any close friends called Timothy, because I'd be like, why is she talking about me?
No, I picked someone I didn't know.
It's a good
name. Timothy was raising this. Last week he was saying that he was wondering about it. And, it's just make people discover it themselves. Help people to be better.
Yeah. Aww. That's going to be the tagline of the show. What do we do when things go wrong? What do we do when we've said no in whatever way we've managed to phrase it, and we've said we can't make this safe, and then a person or the project doesn't listen to the conservation advice and something goes wrong, object damage, object loss, whatever it is. What do we do?
What is our inner urge to do?
Punch someone in the face and start crying. I didn't say that. I'm a professional. Write a damage report and Contact the police.
I think our inner urge is to rush in and almost throw our bodies on the situation, you know. Broken object here, I must protect. And you know what? And then the urge, you know, the I told you so stuff.
Yeah.
And I would keep away. Keep away.
Yeah.
Stay away. That's my advice. Wait till somebody asks for you. If somebody says, oh, we need Kloe here, then you turn up to help. But if you turn up and start putting up the yellow and black tape and saying, well, I told you this was going to go wrong. I knew this was going to go wrong. We're going to close the gallery now and they're going to lose a leg and they'll have their eye out. Then you're the voice of doom and gloom and you're the neighbour. Yes. And suddenly, I've really got this thing from a feminist perspective, but you're suddenly the one talking about the problem. So the person who did the tup thing and dropped it, they've walked off, you know. They've gone away to fill in a piece of paper. And you're suddenly standing there. So when the importance descend, who's standing there amongst the broken things? Remember that when you were kids, you know, your brother or sister was really good at getting away and leaving you looking like you'd broken the window.
That's
the parents just shout at the first one they see.
Yeah, that's such a good point of view.
It is.
So if you wait till you're asked, I mean, why do you need to go? The object has been broken. I don't honestly believe that it is our ethical duty to throw ourselves at the broken object. I think our ethical duty is to treat the broken objects that we're asked to treat. So if somebody asks us to treat it, we turn up and say, oh, this is what we can do. This is how we can help.
For the listeners, Jane is putting a very winning smiley face.
And I've turned up with my how to help kit, you know, and maybe called in by someone more senior so that you don't have to deal with the I told you it was wrong stuff, because I told you so is like such an unconstructive message. However, you know, you've just got to bury that deep inside. You can go home and tell your cat/partner. You can then maybe press your advantage though. So that'll be the next day you'd say, in the light of events, here's my handy guide on what to do if things get dropped. And can I also remind you, here's our handling policy.
Yeah, that is good. That is diplomatic and stealthy.
Boom.
Yeah, mic drop. It's about learning from your mistakes, isn't it? And I mean, as an institution, also you as a conservative, maybe there was another way you could have communicated that, but maybe ultimately you tried everything that you could. You pulled all the rabbits out of your hat when you were trying to deliver the message that this shouldn't have been done. But sometimes that's just the way it is, and you can only give advice. You cannot make people take it. Yeah, and that's true of everything. And it's true as a freelancer or an in-house conservator. You cannot make people do what you would like them to do, but you can give advice. And ultimately that's all it is.
Force people to do things, then they'll resent it and they'll hate you and they won't do. You know, if anyone's ever worked in a factory or some really repetitive job, or I worked on a cheese gas, and you just spend your entire day thinking of ways of undermining how the thing works, don't you? How can I play the system in order to get my best possible advantage, you know, and just not go insane? So if you force people to behave in a certain way and they don't agree with it, then the second your back's turned, they'll undermine you. So in a sense, sometimes it's like let go of the short-term loss and play the long game and think about how you win them round over a period of time, so we can learn from this as opposed to you are a moron. That's a long-term strategy, isn't it?
Yes.
And okay, some objects go, oh, and you know the other thing, you know what we're like with damage, you know, we're so bad at maybe try to I don't know, you know, we go, oh, look at that, isn't that great? You see those damages, you see those holes, oh, lovely.
Just think of the conservation you could do on that.
Yeah.
I have generally had someone rock up to me, you know, rather than going doom and gloom, has rocked up to me and said, I'm keeping you in business. And it's like, wow, what's happened?
It's another way of looking at it. If people didn't break things, they wouldn't need conservators.
I think I have in the past said to a very upset collections assistant, hey, you tried your best, sometimes it gets broken.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the most heartbreaking thing is volunteers. I broke the thing. And it's like, oh, no, it's okay. It's okay. That's why you got me. Isn't it great? It's okay. Just go and have a cup of tea. And we won't ever do this again, will we? Yeah. It's going to be okay.
There's one museum, didn't they do a Twitter thing where a kid broke something and then they kind of invited him back to see it being meant and redisplayed?
Yes, they did. Yeah, I remember that.
See that. Which object was that?
It was a ceramic, wasn't it? I want to say it was a ceramic.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, to make it less traumatizing for him, you know, like, I quite like that. It was very human of them. And
it also has conservation again. Look at us. We're access. I mean, yes, an object has been broken and no, we're not chuffed about it. But let's, instead of sort of reflecting on that side of it, let's reflect on what's the positive thing we can go from here. It's the long game stuff.
Yeah.
I have an example that's similar, but I don't know whether I should name the museum. an unnamed museum.
Okay.
The giant ceramic that was accidentally tipped down the stairs along with the visitor. Wasn't that man banned?
Oh, yes.
That's another way of doing it, I guess.
But
You're
wasn't
never
their
welcome back.
website wonderful afterwards? Have you seen all the animations and the conservation? And you can join in. They've got like a little animation tool that you can do retouching.
Oh, no,
my
that's so
gosh.
cute.
But that is that vase was almost more famous after, but the conservation got such a good profile out of it.
Yes.
And they did such a beautiful job with the interactives. And again, it wasn't an ideal situation. None of us, welcome that sort of thing. But they really made such a positive, right from the archaeological mapping of all the pieces, all the way through to the retouching, I love the little interactive games on the computer that you can do with them. Have you seen them?
No, I haven't. I'm going to have to put a link in the show notes. It's interesting to think about, because that was obviously a really public image, really positive thing actually, where something's happened and we're really, really turning it into something that's really good and a tool for outreach. As for you can have the right opposite sometimes, where something is very much covered up, like, oh, why is this giant painting not here? We're not talking about it. Okay, I was just asking. That's okay. And then mysteriously it reappears a year later and it's pristine and it's like, what happened to the painting? Don't ask questions.
There is a slight line in it. No, there isn't.
Nothing happened. Nobody spilled ink on it. You can hush it. But what's the point? Why not try to make it something positive and something to learn from? Because ultimately it does actually get conservation out there as a profession, which is really nice.
So I think this has relevance to our well-being episode, that we have this sort of pressure to feel perfect all the time. We have to be the perfect conservator. We have to protect all the things. We have to make sure that nothing goes wrong. We operate to the best of best practice, and nothing ever goes wrong with us because we're super amazing.
But in actual fact, pick your battles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another thing is, and this is a bit more psychology, apologies now, some people work from what the best is and work back, and some people work from what the current is and work forwards. And we tend to have our own natural approaches on that. I mean, I think I've changed a little bit through my life, but I think you probably recognise yourself is when you go into a store or something and you imagine what it could be like, and then you feel how far you are from it, and that's how you just draw up your plans. Or you can go in a store and you can think, oh, I'll just pick that thing up over there and move it away from the water.
And I'm that person.
But
I'm an improver, not a perfectionist.
If you're an improver, then you get pleasure from every improvement. If you are a perfectionist, then you are always frustrated until you get to perfection. And that's fine, because if that's who you are, you're used to being that person. But say you're working with a colleague, say a curator who's an improver, and you're a perfectionist, then they are feeling like, well, hang on, why are we trying? Because I've done this, we've done all these things better, and they're still not happy. So, like, what is it? Make this person happy. So if you are a perfectionist, it's, I think a lot of conservators are. I think that's not unnatural for us to be that way. You have to just think about how your messaging, what you're saying about a situation, might really jar with someone else who can't see why you can't check the improvements and be pleased about them.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point, actually. Personality types do matter.
Yeah. I think I'm somewhere in between. I feel like I started off as a perfectionist, but now I've sort of worked at so many different types of places, so many different sort of levels of resources, essentially, and so many different stages on the road to best practice that I think I've sort of chilled out more towards improver, but I've still got that in the back of my mind. I'd say definitely I do work from best back, and just I suppose I'm just not so stressed out about how far back I have to go before I hit the current.
Maybe this is essentially the ultimate interview question: is are you an improver or a perfectionist? Yeah. Speaking of picking your battles, I know that I asked you about this, Jane, because when I started my latest job, the one I have now, then I brought up there's a giant taxidermy bear that people keep coming in and hugging.
Yes.
And touching, and they love this bear. This bear is everyone's favourite.
What's his name again?
Marco.
How is Marco?
Marco is bald.
Oh dear.
Right, Marco is bald, and he looks like a polar bear because he's bleached white, essentially.
No.
So, but Marco is such a popular attraction, and the whole idea is that people who have always touched him come in and let their children touch him, and it's this very embedded thing. So I remember asking you, Jane, when I first started, is there anything I can do about this? Because I'm so concerned. There might be pesticides in him. He's really good, Nick, aside from the bald patches. You know, I really worry about what's in him. And then I think you and I had a little debate, and we kind of came to the conclusion that, but this is historic. This is what people do, and putting up barriers and making him inaccessible is actually just going to make people massively sad and or angry. And it's, what are you achieving? You're taking enjoyment away from people, and ultimately there's probably no way of stopping it short of putting him actually in a glass display case, which you can't afford anyway, so good luck.
Yeah.
But it's about picking your battles, where it was something I initially really worried about because I saw it all the time and I couldn't unsee it. You know, the little children coming up and hugging his leg and putting their face right with the ball patches. It's like, oh, what are you doing? I have relaxed since then and kind of come to see it as, this is how the public interacts with this object. It is much like people always come in and touch like a special rock in some places. And, you know, people have these little rituals. And sometimes, even if it makes me itch, I just have to accept that. And that's okay.
It's I would argue that conservators, we don't conserve materials, we conserve value.
Yeah.
And if we conserve value, then you have to just say, what's the value of Marco? And the value of Marco is that your granddad hugged him and your mum and dad hugged him, and now you're hugging him.
Yeah.
And you've all got a photo. Admittedly, in the first picture, he was brown and furry.
Yes.
White and bald. But, you know, if you're not happy about that kind of conversation, then you get your colleagues and you say, can we talk about what we have Marco for?
Yeah.
And what do we think is important about Marco? And if everyone says, well, what's important about Marco is he's the only one of this bear in the world, or that, you know, is the only specimen, then you have to say, well, do we think we're doing the right thing? But if, you know, everyone agrees that the value of Marco is that he's just the thing, the local thing that everybody loves in the museum, then we preserve that value. And by putting a glass case around him would be damaging to that form of value.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in my opinion.
Yes.
I suppose in my current place of work, there's a similar attitude of, there are rotating open display objects and we are able to rotate them and have loads of different ones on display because they are on open display. And the nature of being able to do that is putting them at risk, essentially, of being touched. People do touch them. People do interact with them in that way. We monitor them. But to make them safer, essentially, putting them all behind perspex, whatever it is, would mean that we couldn't rotate them. We couldn't get loads out on display. We just wouldn't be able to display them in the way that we display them. And it's the value of them is the way that they're displayed is the way that we can get people to see them as much as possible. So I absolutely resonate with this.
And that's the kind of thing, that's the sort of thing that we have to negotiate all the time, really. So, you know, that's part of being heard and thinking about what you're saying and what you're trying to do.
Anyway, so should we play a game?
Yes.
Let's make a positive out of a negative.
Okay.
Whoop, whoop.
I don't know how easy or hard this is going to be.
I'm nervous.
Yes.
Okay, Jenny, give us a challenge. You've got one.
Okay, there's a nice giant painting receiving a lot of UV light in a lovely staircase with like beautiful Venetian windows. Oh. It's too big to go anywhere else in the museum. What are you going to do?
How important is the painting, Jenny?
Very. Like, it has local significance. Like, it's important to the house.
Chloe, are we thinking UV glazing?
I'm thinking UV filters. I'm also wondering whether there are any like integral blinds, or is there a view outside, or is it a building site outside and the view doesn't matter?
Yeah, because I was just going to putting a glazing on the painting.
Oh, I was thinking windows.
Ooh.
I was thinking of the windows, though I suppose glazing on the painting is possibly more straightforward.
It's expensive. You get that stuff with that ground finish that doesn't reflect.
Yeah.
It's like to go with a grant bid for that one.
Okay.
Because I think it's quite pricey. Because presumably, if your painting is in the stairs and there's windows everywhere, the light's bouncing off it really awkwardly.
Yeah.
So we could go with people can't really see this properly, and we've come across this really fab new glazing, which has UV filter in it.
Yeah.
It just happens to have completely perfect for this exact situation.
I like it.
It is a little bit expensive.
So someone's going to have to write a grant. But we don't have to do anything to the windows because the windows are lovely and everyone loves the windows.
So a UV film on the windows is a no-go.
Well, in this particular instance, I'm thinking, well, they're kind of more like skylights. So how would you get up there easily?
Oh, I see.
Oh, that's a bit tricky.
Yeah, okay.
Tricky and probably really expensive in terms of both the film and getting scaffolding.
So maybe a film over one thing rather than multiple things. I see.
See, that's not bad. That's good problem solving, team. I think that rather than take the painting away and put it in store, it's we can do this thing.
Well, I mean, part of me is thinking, what's the turning circle like on the painting? Do you have to take it off the stretcher in order to get it down? Like, how big is it?
No, it can be maneuvered outside, but it cannot go on any other wall.
Right, I see. Okay.
So the issue is very much that it's the only wall with no window on it.
I see.
Well,
What if it's a loan and the loaning institution has a new registrar or conservation professional
checking up on
everything, sees the situation, goes, this is unacceptable. What do you think you're doing? And what do you think you've been doing for the last 20 years? What then?
Ooh, then probably shuffle, apologise, look embarrassed, blush a lot.
So what's on loan? What is it? Do we know?
If it's I suppose mine is my challenge is just altering the scenario slightly so that the giant painting is a loan, a historic loan, a long-term loan from an institution that has just got a new registrar or conservation professional who is doing checkups of all of their objects out on loan and is now changing the stipulations, essentially saying this is unacceptable. Why are you allowing so much damage onto my object?
Do you know, I don't know about you, Jenny, but I think if it's their object, it's their right to take it back.
It certainly is. So I think you'd have to open up the line of communication and go, if you're very unhappy with this, then you're going to have to take it back. Then possibly offer them some other lines of options, like some other options where it's like, we could do this, but we will need funding for it. So you and I will have to do a joint grant bid if you'd like that to happen, and here's the time scale, make a little project plan. So offer to go halfsies, like
what about the dreaded risk assessment? What about going with let's write a risk assessment together for moving it. Where are you thinking of putting it?
I like that,
because presumably they haven't got a wall for it either, otherwise they would have loaned it to you.
Yes, exactly.
True. Yes,
that's true. And then, is it just going to go back in stores? And that, that's dreadfully sad, isn't it? And then you can probably make some argument about public engagement and how appreciated it is in the museum.
It's 100,000 viewers a day, a year.
Yeah, and then how it's really pimping them because it has a nice sign next to it saying this is loaned from the so and so museum. And
gratefully loaned from.
Amazing kudos, which means that people go, where's that museum? Maybe I'll go there as well.
Okay, that was very well done, ladies. Very good.
Jane, what's yours?
Okay, so your art gallery has got a leak in the roof. And there's water coming through and collecting it in the bucket you've placed. How do we make anything positive out of that?
Oh, look, it's no longer too dry in here. Too obvious.
We've solved the low humidity problem.
Is this turning it into a positive for the institution or for the visitors?
I guess you're the conservator and you're looking at the gallery and the bucket and you've just been listening to the C word and you're thinking, right, I've got to try and make something positive out of this and I can't be a naysayer. How the heck do I say anything constructive to anyone apart from,
How far away is the closest object?
Well, it's a paintings gallery, so they're all on the walls.
Oh, I know what you can do. You can get some of these nice absorbent, bill kits.
Yes.
And then that's modern art in the middle.
Oh.
Very avant-garde.
Very avant-garde.
Very avant-garde. I mean, if I go at it with an institutional hat on it, then it's like, now we can make some sort of public funding appeal because people can go in and see that this isn't good, is it? It's coming into a bucket. That's dreadful.
Yes.
Don't you want all these paintings to be safe and lovely forever? Donate now to a GoFundMe.
So we need like a collecting box?
Yes, definitely a collecting box.
Yes.
And a website.
Yes.
And a social media campaign.
And some polythene sheeting.
Yes.
I think the director may say no, but I think we should go with it anyway. At least we said something.
Yes. Yeah.
We've made a clear suggestion.
Yeah. Or can we say, well, here's the good news, we can keep half of the gallery open? Or is that too negative and obviously manipulative?
Well, I think, Chloe, at least saying something like, well, which paintings can we keep? it's better than which paintings do we have to take down.
Yes.
Yes. No, that's true. That's true.
Yes, definitely.
It's been the positive language. That's good. What can we keep?
Isn't it good that this isn't hazardous water?
Oh, it's not good that it's quite clean.
Yeah.
It's not from a toilet overflow.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's pretty good. I think we did okay with those.
I think we tried. We really gave it a good shot.
Yeah, I mean, not everything does have a happy outcome, but you can attempt it. I think that's the takeaway from that.
Yeah. I think people there does tend to be a change in attitude as soon as things like the building starts going wrong. Like if there's water ingress, at least in my experience, people do sort of they sort of sit up straighter and go, oh, right, let's get someone in.
I feel like it depends. If it's the main museum where visitors come, then yes. If it's the store, I feel like the general consensus tends to be it's not that bad.
Cover it in some sheeting.
You can just change the bucket every now and then, you know? Or it's not really funding right now. Or we don't even know if we want to keep this building. Why would we do roof repairs? That seems dumb. So those attitudes can be more difficult to deal with. As we're very much, yes, I agree. If it's the main museum building, then it's much easier to get people on board with taking it seriously. If it is just the store, then it's not so sexy anymore to do the repairs and to find the money.
Or we would like to
maybe we can
raise the funds to repair the building so that we can do store tours.
There's an angle.
Heritage Open Day, similar.
There's an angle
festivals, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, getting other people in to look at your dirty little secret.
Yes.
But it might be a way of getting somebody else to point out without you having to be the one that, points out the bad news.
Yeah. That's also true, yeah. I feel like the tagline for this should be manipulating people. Gently massaging people into...
So the titles are either Listen Up, Being Heard in Conservation, or Manipulation, Influence in Conservation.
Yeah, because that's what I started by saying, is that it's not so much what you're saying, it's what they're thinking that matters, and you can find that out by listening.
Yeah, no, that's true.
So listen up.
Yeah. Oh, pro tip. I like it. Oh, what a positive note to end on. I like that. Thank you for joining us, Jane. You were an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. Hello, listeners. Today I'm here with my new adhesive friend Aquazol, and I've been doing some testing. I hadn't heard about Aquazol until recently, but it seems to have been coming into conservation from industrial use since the late 90s. There are a few papers from around this time, particularly by Julie Arslangelou, which states properties and comparisons with other adhesives. And there is a more recent paper in volume 35 of the Icon Journal, Aquazol as a consolidant for matte paint on Vietnamese paintings. Initially, I was researching its use as a consolidant for painted textiles, but in my reading, I noticed that it has been reported as forming good heat-activated films. The object I'm working on at the moment is a painted brittle silk banner with flaking paint layers. So an adhesive textile support and consolidant is exactly what I need. I like this adhesive because of various reasons that have been outlined in the papers, including its solubility in loads of different solvents, including alcohol and water. It's non-toxic, and it just generally seems like a really good, easy to work with adhesive. And that if it can be used for both consolidants and films, it'd be nice to keep each adhesive that I'm using the same. To start with, I tested a 10% film in IMS as a comparison with the same percentage of Lascaux, and it was far too stiff. It completely changed the movement properties of the silk, and it just didn't seem to leave the silk crapulene support when I added heat. I also tried using a solvent environment, but that just penetrated far too much instead. It caused massive darkening, and it would have been a nightmare to remove and reverse if I had to. So that wasn't suitable either. So let's have a look at my film. So this is a 5% film in IMS. It seems fairly even, there are no gaps. I'm not great at adhesive film cast textiles, as I'm still learning. It has a very different feel to Lascaux, the equivalent of a Lascaux film, and a very, very different feel to the 10% Aquazol that I was using, as you'd expect. Still not as soft as Lasco. It's still quite stiff, it seems. There does seem to be some tack created with my fingers, so maybe that will be helpful. But let's see. Now for the attachment test. I'm using a heated spatula at 70 degrees. The TG is reported, of Aquazol is reported at 69 to 71 degrees C. But I did notice with my previous tests for the 10% that didn't seem to cut it. It wasn't hot enough. So I'll try from 70 degrees, but I suspect I may have to increase it. Well, it seems to be sticking a bit, but not very much. I wouldn't call it attached. So I'm increasing it now to 90. So I'm at 90 degrees C now, and I'm getting some results. It is casting nicely now. It's attaching quickly as well, so even though I'm worried about the higher temperature against the silk, for use against an actual object, it does reactivate very quickly, so there's less exposure to the heat even though it's higher. So my film is cast. It's nice and even, and I'm pulling it. It seems very strong. The peel strength is actually pretty low still, so it wouldn't be problematic to remove it necessarily, and it wouldn't cause damage as far as I can tell. It seems somewhat weaker than Lasco in comparisons with the peel test though. I'm sure you could probably argue that both ways, to be honest. Different suitabilities for different substrates. And it does seem to be quite strong pulling against it along the length of it. It doesn't, as something would be hanging, for example, it doesn't seem to want to go at all, which is encouraging. So it can be easily peeled, but not easily removed or easily fail once hanging or once supporting a textile. We still have the problem of stiffness though, and next I think I'll try halving the concentration again to 2.5% and see what strength results I can get with that versus the movement qualities of the finished cast textile. A specific problem for my workplace is split damage caused at the interface between silk and painted areas. So this adhesive that's suitable for both paint and silk could be really well used for patch supports, but maybe not for large areas of textile if it changes the movement quality too much for purposes of hanging, and if it changes the general quality of how a textile is hung, specifically if it's fine silk, for example. I'm also not keen on using high temperatures, as I said earlier, and it might cause problems for different paint types like acrylic, which I'll need to do the testing for anyway. So if any listeners have had experience with Aquazol in this way as film casts or have any thoughts on this at all in my results and testing, please don't hesitate to contact us at the C Word. Thank you very much.
Dear Jane, I have a curator who is absolutely impossible to work with. He doesn't listen to anything I say, and often I just get mansplaining thrown back in my face. Whether it's wearing gloves to handling objects sensibly, he just will not listen. Nothing seems to be working. What can I do? Best, Chris. Dear Chris, thanks for your question. And I just want to start by saying something which you might be surprised about, and that is that you can't win every battle. And one of the things that we sometimes have to do as conservators is learn to live with the fact that some people just won't listen. That's not to say that you should give up. I just want to say that you don't have to necessarily own other people's behaviour problems. You don't have to own other people's attitudes. If it's their problem and their attitude, then you have to do what you can, but also protect your own well-being, sense of self, and don't get absolutely drawn into their world and their way of behaving, because there's nothing worse than coming home from the end of the day and having been unpleasant or argumentative all day because somebody else wants to be that way. So be professional, do what you need to do, but be prepared to walk away. So that said, what can you do? Well, in any encounter, there's what you say, there's you, and there's them. And there's also a way you say those things to them. So there's a couple of things you can do. You can try to think of ways of making him think it was his own idea, which is, I think sometimes a little bit iffy, isn't it? That women have to give away their ideas in order to get anything done. But maybe you could do that. Perhaps you prefer to get somebody else to endorse your ideas. basically the go above their head strategy. Now, going above people's heads is very dangerous organisationally, so be extremely careful how you do that. Think about doing it subtly, perhaps by winning someone more senior to them, someone that they respect in an informal encounter, talking things over, not in terms of, grassing up this guy, but more in terms of sort of discussing matters of professionalism, making sure that they've got gloves when they're handling objects, in the hope that at one point they will tell the curator what to do and put them down, and put them into their place, not put them down. Mansplaining, you don't have to put up with. You could think about going to human resources. That's a very big topic in terms of what your chances of success are there. And perhaps Jenny and Kloe can do a whole episode about that, and I could expand on my thoughts then. But you can also just put things in writing, put them across, leave them on the table. And if they don't do them, then you can think to yourself, well, I've explained it, but that's all I can do. Other things that you can do is get people around them working better so that they have peer-to-peer influence. So that if you can work on people who are not necessarily influencing the person that is bothering you, but are around them, so perhaps not their boss, but their colleagues, then that might also create a bit of social isolation. So I don't think it's easy. You can change your message and sort of change it to away from you've got to wear gloves because otherwise you're going to harm the objects, to gloves convey a sense of prestige, or if you leave your fingerprints on these, we may end up with damage that could cause an insurance claim or something like that. Oh, of course, the old Simon Sharma wears gloves defence. But once you've said your piece and once you've put your arguments across, make sure that they're recorded, make sure that they're said appropriately, calmly, in an appropriate circumstance. If they won't listen, walk away. You're a better person than them. You don't have to live like that. That's my advice. Over and out.
And now for some comments, questions, and corrections. As usual, we love hearing from you, so please feel free to get in touch. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but a couple of months ago, we tweeted about why Melinex is always high shine. Like, it's always clear with that really high shine.
Yeah.
And Pell got in touch with us, so Preservation Equipment, because apparently this caused a bit of a talk in the office. They said, this is raised discussion. We're going to get some matte finish polyester as a sample, which we will send to you. Our opinion is that the matte finish is achieved by lightly abrading the polyester surface so it wouldn't affect its properties. Because one of the theories that people had on Twitter was that you're probably adding something to the mixture to make it go matte. So that would, of course, mess up the archival qualities. But it looks like you could actually achieve the same thing by lightly abrading it, which makes sense. So that will matte down the kind of surface gloss. There are literally hundreds of grades and finishes of polyester, so there could also be some matte finishes that are achieved by coating, which will make it unsuitable for archival use, they say. We think that the main reason the polished or gloss finish is generally the only type available is down to, first and foremost, clarity. Polished gloss finish is almost 100% clear, and adding any type of matte finish will reduce that clarity. And secondly, our polyester is grade 401, which is known as industry standard, approved by the Library of Congress in the USA. So it's kind of a product trust thing. Like, people know what they're getting when it's like a Melinex thing.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. And then they actually sent us a couple of samples of the inert matte polyester.
Amazing.
So I've got some comparisons here. I've got regular Melinex and 2 sheets of different microns.
Honestly, I had never thought about this before. I think I had just thought, Melinex, it's this, and not really gone any further with that in my brain.
But then I feel like now that I work within a museum that has an archive, I come across a lot more archive stuff. And I do agree that it's extremely annoying to always have to take delicate things out of the Melinex pockets.
Yeah.
Every time you need to take a photo of it. Because obviously that's kind of not the point, right? You're not supposed to take it in and out all the time. It's supposed to protect it. And it does. But it does get extremely annoying. So that's kind of how this came about. People were a little bit annoyed that they had to handle the fragile material a bit extra much. And I'm totally with them on that. So yeah, we've got in front of us here, this is regular Melinex for comparison.
I see it.
Super glossy. It's practically glossy. A mirror.
I can see oh dear. I can sort of see my expression in it, my face in it. Right, I'm putting this aside.
Then we got the matte one, which is 50 micron.
Oh, I see. Oh, it feels much lighter.
It does.
And it's cloudy, so it's got a sort of milky finish to it. You can still see through it. You could still use it for tracing or working through in that respect. But if you put it on a dark surface, it's pretty milky.
Yeah.
It's pretty milky.
So what I find interesting is that it is certainly less glossy. It's not perfectly matte, but it's less glossy. But yeah, you're going to have some real problems with looking through that. Depending on what kind of material is behind it, you would probably find that really obscures the text that you might want to see or the artwork, actually. Yeah, so actually, I totally see what they mean. It's even when it's achieved by abrasion, that just doesn't really work. And here's the 75 micron, which is slightly thicker. But again, it is hugely milky. It's
actually very interesting kind of quality, because obviously it is very, very see-through, but it's got a sort of just really, really uniform haze to it.
Yeah, it's very difficult to describe. I figured I would probably put out a video just demonstrating these, because they are terrifically odd to look at. And yeah, you look at it and then you're like, yeah, that does the job. And then you put it against something and you go, oh, that doesn't do the job at all. What am I doing?
I think,
the
shine is definitely reduced. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a reduced shine, but it is still there. So it's still reflective. So you would still possibly struggle with that for photography, even if it was more clear.
Yeah.
So actually, the matte polyester doesn't actually solve that problem. And something that Pell did point out was that the haze, which is the manufacturer's term, really reduces the clarity significantly. 10 sheets of this film layered on top of itself, and it's basically opaque.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think the sad truth is that maybe the glossy Melinex is the thing, because there's no good way around it. You kind of can't make it matte without possibly adding something nasty to it, and then what's the point?
Yeah, I think you know what you're getting with the standard Melinex. And I suppose that if we're talking about photography of things in Melinex sheets, maybe there are options like light boxes and things and little cubes and things that can be used to try and reduce some of the gloss, like taking photographs of glass objects.
Yeah, and you know, maybe the thing is, you take one really good photograph and then it lives in its Melinex sleeve.
Yeah.
You know, it might just have to be one of those things that we have to get through. So yeah, thank you to Pell for sending us those samples. That was really helpful. I love that this is being looked into. That's really great. I like that, you know, the Twitter question did result in some answers, even though they're not happy answers.
Well, we know that there are options, and we know that it's really great to know that if a lower shine option is what is necessary, it is what is needed, and actually the opacity isn't really that much of an issue, then that's fantastic, because it could be something for making films or adhesive films. Does this affect the shine that you get from an adhesive that you create an adhesive film with if you're using a less vastly smooth glossy surface? So you could use it for film casting, use the matte version for film casting if it did make a difference. I'd actually be interested to do some experiments with that, actually. So different options, but I suppose we just need to know what the qualities are we need and what the qualities are we'll get.
Yeah, but I think what we have in front of us is actually not the solution, because it's a bit too milky. I think it just is. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. As usual, if you have any comments, questions or corrections, get in touch. Thanks for listening with the C Word, and you've been listening to Jane Henderson, Kloe Rumsey and me, Jen Mathiasen. Join us next time for an episode about funding. In the meantime, check out our website at thecword.show, tweet us at the C Word Podcast, or simply email us on thecwordpodcast@gmail.com. The intro and outro music is Spring by Dita Music, used under a Creative Commons Attribution License. Additional music and sound effects by Callum Robertson. This has been a Wooden Dice production. Let's go outside into the sun.
Yes.